Hey, thanks for joining Garden Hands. I'm Lindsay, and today I thought I would turn the camera on and show you what I have going on in my raised bed garden. This is my favorite time of the year because everything is green, most of the beds are filled, I'm harvesting, and it's not to the completely wild stage yet, which should be coming in a couple weeks. So let's take a look at what I have growing. So this is usually the way that I enter the garden because I'm usually coming from the barn, which is right behind me. I like to go through this way because I have the climbing roses going up this arbor here. And in early spring, most years, we have strawberries. We have both June bearing and ever bearing. This year, I don't know if anybody else had the same issue, but we had basically no June bearing strawberries. I don't know if it was the temperature fluctuations or maybe I didn't start watering early enough. I'm not quite sure what the strawberry issue was. The ever-bearing ones are starting to bloom, and I see some red strawberries in here. So I'm hopeful that we'll get a few, at least for snacking. So in this garden, I have 12 raised beds. So in the first two raised beds, these are both 10 feet long, I have a huge mix of things. The one on the right, so I planted the carrots along the edge as a snack for us, and it's kind of fun to pick the carrots and give to the horses as treats as well. However, I planted them before we put the arbor up, and I also planted these Scarlet runner beans, which are in full bloom right now, and they're beautiful. But when we put the cattle panel arbor in, I realized that I planted the runner beans in front of the carrots. So we have a little bit of an issue getting to the carrots, but that's all right. We can make it work. Over here, this is where I planted in an earlier video a kohlrabi and some beets. I have a few volunteer snapdragons in this area, which I won't ever complain when I have a few pretty little flowers on the edge of beds. This sunflower here is also a volunteer, and I did not have anything in this area, so I'm gonna let it be. We picked one of the beets already, and I think I only had 2 that germinated. Oh, 3, okay. And the kohlrabi back here is really pretty. I think that will be ready to harvest very soon. I know pretty much nothing about kohlrabi, so I'm gonna do a little bit of Googling and figure out if this is ready to go. On the second half of this flower bed, I have cosmos, Oklahoma salmon zinnias, and then we go around the other side, and this is where things kind of get a little more wonky. I had, I think, maybe 3 leftover marigold seeds, so those found a home here. This is cinnamon basil, which smells amazing. I picked some of this last night to go in the pesto that we are preserving or freezing. Then in between here, I planted cabbage and Brussels sprouts. I plant cabbage every single year, and I don't know why. We get terrible bugs. And to be honest, I don't keep up on protecting my cabbage, which is way back there. So usually that gets scrapped. Every year I try. Every year I fail. The other bed that is under the arbor here also has Scarlet runner beans. I have a couple cherry tomatoes hidden in here. So the kids come out here and try to find the first tomatoes of the day. I've tucked a basil in down here for good measure. I planted more zinnias on this side. And these large things here are eggplants. I started these from seed, and I'm not entirely sure if they're doing well or not. They're green, they look okay. They have some Japanese beetle damage, but pretty much everything here does. So I will keep waiting and we'll see what happens with those. On the other side of this large bed, I have the queen lime with blush zinnias. These are stunning. I didn't grow this variety last year, so I'm really glad I picked up some seeds. In the last part of this bed, I have peppers. So the plan was that Dad had started a bunch of pretty bland bell peppers, sweet peppers, and I thought that I was going to be planting some of them over here because I know peppers are not his favorite. But he planted them all at his house, so we had open room in our beds. And my husband had the idea that maybe we should try to make our own hot sauce. He's kind of been into adding a lot of hot sauce to his food lately. So we have a lot of hot peppers in here. I don't even know all the varieties. So we have quite a few varieties in here. I know we have habaneros. I think we have 6 habaneros. Who needs 6 habaneros? Oh my goodness. There's 2 other beds that have peppers as well, so we'll check those out too. The next 2 of my 10-foot beds are over here. The one on the right, I have straw flowers, which are really cute. It seems they close up every night, and then as they open, their petals unfurl, and they are a papery texture. They're very dry feeling and sounding, but they're really cool. I planted way too many of these seeds. I probably have straw flowers in maybe 4 or 5 different flower beds. So that is one note that I am taking for next year. I don't need quite so many. They're cool, but I can find something else that I would like just as well. Then we have more peppers. So over here, we have a candy cane pepper, which has really cool variegated leaves. At least I hope it's supposed to be variegated and that's not some kind of a disease. The kids ate the first 2 of these peppers and they really liked them, so that's good. I always like when they try things and it works out well. We have a bunch of poblanos in here, jalapenos, a Cubanelle Biscayne. I'm not sure what that is. So these I tried to plant, they were not quite as hot. I thought if I had one bed where they were slightly more mild, then if the kids wanted to have any, they could come to this bed. More cosmos. Then we have some tomatoes. So the kids found this chocolate cherry tomato. So that will be fun to try. And then there's a couple others. These might even be volunteers from last year. So on the other side of this bed, we have our beans. I try to do these in a succession planting. So I started wax beans, which are in front, and then the back are just bush beans, green beans. And then I'll probably start another succession here this week. I believe we have a bed that will be cleared out. We had our first harvest of these yesterday, so towards the end of July, and they were delicious. My 4th 10-foot bed. In here I have snap peas. These are my favorite in the garden. I do not have a trellising system yet for my peas. That's on the list for next year, but I don't really care. You know, they grow, they kind of intermingle and become a mess, and they usually don't last real long in the July heat, so we pick what we can and then we plant another succession of them, and that works for us. In the back half, I have rosemary and more random tomatoes that I'm pretty sure just self-seeded. So they came from last year. And then here's my pansy that just showed up and I didn't have the heart to get rid of it, and it is growing like crazy. So on the other side of this bed, I planted another row of zinnias. Apparently I thought I was going to be lacking in zinnias. Then I planted like 10 celery plants. This is another thing where I don't need that much. I started these from seed. I'm not sure if I thought they were going to be difficult to germinate, but I didn't have the heart to throw the extra, so I planted all of them. And I know Dad can use this when he makes his V8 juice, but they look awesome. We had a couple pieces already, and they're amazing. But next year, don't plant so much celery. And then on the end here, we have a bunch of snapdragons. This was the Tequila Sunrise mix, and there's a ton of them in here. If we come in here from the west side of the garden, this is the side where the house is right behind me. I have clematis on these 2 forms, obelisks, and I don't know. They looked amazing a month ago, and now they look terrible. Then in the front, I have a row of Munstead Lavender, and I actually have a few more planted or started down here, so it finishes off the row. So behind the lavender, I actually planted about 100 daffodils for a nice little spring pop of color, and that was beautiful. To use the space during the summer, we were actually given a bunch of glads from one of the neighbors, and so I thought that was a great spot. So we're gonna have a huge row of color, and I don't know what color these are gonna be, so it's a little bit of a surprise. I have the same thing on the other side. The lavender is much sparser over here. I lost a couple plants over the winter, but I have a few growing in their place, and hopefully in a year or two we'll have a nice little hedge here, and then more glads behind it. So we'll pop back and look at the next 4 raised beds. On the left, I have more zinnias. We have some onions tucked in here, and we have more peppers because we probably didn't have enough in the other 2 beds. So in this bed we have cayenne, quite a bit of cayenne, a Tabasco pepper. A lot of them have the label of hot. I hope my husband knows what he's doing when we get this hot sauce made. Oh, we've got some serranos in there. Look at that. Can you see? It's hard to see all of them. Oh my gosh, there's like 30 serranos on that plant. That's so exciting. I love coming out here and seeing when there's actually fruit coming. This last bed, it's a little bit hard to see. The sun is coming. We have the rhubarb. We have 2 rhubarb plants, and this was the first year we got to pick any, which was fantastic. We made a rhubarb crisp. It was delicious. So I popped in some sunflowers that we could use for our cut flowers. Next year, I think maybe I put zinnias in here instead of sunflowers. This one is getting humongous, so it's kind of blocking the garden from our house view, which is fine. It's a pretty sunflower, but it's way bigger than I thought. It could even be one that grows like 10 feet tall. It's still growing. So next year, note to self, maybe put zinnias in here instead of sunflowers. Going back to the clematis entrance and looking at the beds that are to the right of it, we have onions planted in here. And I had a little bit of trouble with some of my onions getting water early on, and I decided to pull them up because they were just cute little green onions at that point. I used those, and I planted some of the potatoes that I had purchased and forgot about. So they're looking great. They're a little bit probably behind schedule, but I think they'll be okay. In this bed, it looks a little bit sparse because we had garlic in here. I had wanted to do a video about harvesting the garlic, but I kept waiting too long, and then it looked terrible. So it was past the point of when you should harvest it. It still works. I'm drying it right now, but it wouldn't have made a very pretty video. So we planted a row of zinnias in here. Yesterday my daughter added 2 more rows of a different color zinnia, and then we've got onions in the other half. And on the far east side of my garden, I have 4 more of the small beds. In this bed here, it started out with snap peas, and we picked those, ate those, harvested those. Delicious. Planted a couple row of zinnias in here. I think that might be my flower of the year. And then I planted a row of Chianti hybrid sunflowers, and we actually don't deal with a ton of deer issues out here. They eat the strawberries if we don't cover them, but they must like sunflowers. So I put this pretty little gate up, and we'll see if that helps keep them out. I believe my kids came out and planted more sunflowers here yesterday, so we'll see if this little gate deters some of the deer activity. If not, that's okay, because it's kind of hard to get rid of the deer. We are 20 feet away from the woods, so the fact that all I ate was 5 sunflowers and a couple bites of strawberry leaves, I think that's pretty good. Then the next bed, I planted more glads. I'm not sure if these are the variety from the neighbors or if this might be my grandma's mix. I may actually never know. It depends what both varieties look like. Then we've got kale. That worked out well. This is the bed we planted a bunch of lettuces in earlier this spring. I think we did a video with it. The lettuce worked for a little bit. Then we had 2 or 3 nights very, very, very cold, way below freezing, and then the temperature jumped up for like 10 days. And then the leafy greens that we had in here, they just wilted and died. So the next bed is my herbs. So I have parsley, oregano, lots and lots and lots of basil, and lots of cilantro that I'm continuing to start in different successions. Definitely could have put a few more herbs in here, but I feel that we just don't really use them. We use a lot of cilantro and we use a lot of basil, but we don't really use a lot of the other herbs, and I kind of feel bad planting them if we're not going to use them. And the last raised bed that I have is the asparagus bed. But this year, I thought it would be fun to put sunflowers in it so that it wasn't just asparagus. I'm hoping that's okay and it doesn't affect the asparagus any. But it made for a very pretty June display. These were the Pro Cut Plum. This last row over here is where I plant my vine crops. I got these in the ground very, very, very late, and a couple of them didn't work, so I had to plant them again even later. So here we're gonna try a cantaloupe, we'll try a watermelon. I have it written down somewhere what these are, but they are not labeled out here. I may have a zucchini in here. I have possibly a pie pumpkin, and then just a regular, like Halloween type jack-o'-lantern pumpkin as well. I don't know which is which, but it's kind of fun just to be surprised. Most of them look pretty healthy, so that's exciting. So I'm standing at the back of the garden, just for reference. There's the barn, and then the house is over there. And when I made the garden plan, I kind of wanted to have a row around the outside that could be for pretty flowers or perennials. I'm getting there. I think I like having the vine crops over here, and I liked how the entrance over by the clematis had the row of lavender, the row of daffodils, and the row of glads. I'll keep that. And then the front of the garden, what I call the front, has the strawberries. So on this back side, I have flowers. Over here I have a dahlia. It's doing good. It's a decorative border dahlia, so it's not going to get super big. Then I have a little patch of hollyhocks. These are the peaches and cream. And these are Japanese beetle magnets. This is the first year that I've had several stalks of blooms, which is amazing. But the Japanese beetles just flock to these things like crazy. And there are so many of them here. You see the Japanese beetles sleeping in there? Probably not. They just love these. So I kind of sacrifice the hollyhocks here, hoping that the Japanese beetles will come to these. There's just so many, I don't know what I can do about them. I have a self-seeded sunflower that showed up, so I left that. He's very pretty. I have a couple of the dahlias from our neighbors. These are the sun-kissed variety, behind the pansies there. And there's another one down here. I have a bunch of rudbeckia here, which is really pretty. And I have queen lime with blush zinnias at the edge. On the other side of my pathway, I have some coneflowers, another little sunflower that decided it should live here. I have some butterfly weed. It just came out of bloom. That was sweet. And then I have more Pro Cut Plum sunflowers. They are by far my favorite sunflowers so far. I have two more dahlias over here. These are the Blue Teaful variety. I think that's exciting to see those doing so well. And then I have Autumn Beauty sunflowers. I planted one succession of these, and that's my garden at the end of July. I love this time of year because things are growing. Things are climbing up over the arbors, and they're not to the crazy bushy out of control stage yet. That's just to come, I'm sure. I'm very happy with how things are going this year. There's a couple things that I would change, but overall most of the beds are filled and they're looking good. I'm happy. So far so good. Now let's head over and take a look at what Dad has set up in his garden.
Hi, this is Tim with Garden Hands. So this is the second half of the garden tour. This is what we grow over at the farm. A little bit of a recap. This is my first year at commandering a garden. Commandeering? Commandeering, that's the word I'm looking for. At commandeering a garden. We've got a drip line in ours that's been running since the beginning almost when we started planting, which I think has been a good deal. The plants have grown nice and most of them have grown nice and even. And we're hoping that on the tomatoes that you don't get that dry and then that wet and get them to surge and split as much. This is, what day is today? July 24th. So I planted this, except this little bit here. This is some zinnias and one marigold that grew. Two, there's one coming. Whoop, whoop. Those were a flop. Half of them didn't. But this is a little bit of dill that we started to grow, or we grew. It didn't all grow. We'll have enough for some batches of pickles, and we'll have to find some at a local farmer's market for the rest of it. So on our planting, we planted our peppers between the 25th and the 30th of May. I don't recall exactly when. We've got 15 or 20 plants here. So we have just a few of them. These are the early ones that probably aren't the best ones. But they'll freeze up and we'll keep those and use those for salsa or soup or whatever we make them for after that, or tomato soup or V8 juice. They're starting to come good. At first they didn't take off very well at all, and one of the neighbors said to use some what did he tell me to use? Some Epsom salt. We tried that, and then we also put a little bit of fertilizer like we would use with the tomatoes on them. And after that, they kind of started to, they've got a nice plant look to them now. Before they were kind of anemic looking, weren't they? So on our tomatoes, we planted this first row. It's all the way to the end of tomatoes. They were planted on the 19th of May, and the other row was planted on the 24th of May. They're doing real well with that drip irrigation. I think that keeps them going awful good. We're gonna have tomatoes, unless something happens, knock on wood, we're gonna have a lot of tomatoes, which is a great thing. We can share them with a lot of people. They've done good. Like I said, we haven't had any issues. Lindsay's been over and we've been trimming them up from the bottom, trying to remove a few more of the bottom leaves to keep them so we got some airflow underneath and not worry about rain, which we don't have anyway, but they've been doing good. We fertilized them a little bit when we planted them, and about 3 weeks after we planted them, we also put down a little bit when we had noticed the other end of it, they didn't take off like these did. But now the other end seems to be catching up, and you can see that and we've been pinching them off pretty good. Towards the last week or so, we kind of haven't been trying to get rid of the suckers as much. But it looks like a good crop so far. Time will tell, but in a couple weeks I think we'll have the results of it, or start having them. On our first row, we have Amish paste, beefsteak, and some Abe Lincolns. And then we have 20 of these, the last plants that we purchased, that are quite a variety, probably 3 or 4 different kinds of each that we bought from the neighbor nursery. So we have some Beefmaster, Better Boy, okay. We've got some Sweet Seedless. They're gonna be here really quick. And then we have some Roma on the other side. We got 2 cherry tomato plants, and then another assortment on the last 15 plants on that side. So you can see what the size of these are. These have done really good. As far as our trellis or wire, the jury is out on that. It's probably, it's 75 feet long. To get from one side to the other, you got to walk from one end to the other. Kind of a pain. Probably Lindsay said I shouldn't do it that way. It holds them up fairly well, but you can see that it's starting to sag a little bit because there's so much fruit on it. You have to train them, and you have to keep training them, it seems like. To keep them tied up, we've got some that we need to catch up with today, or the end of this week, that need to be brought back up to them. And we just use a piece of twine and just lightly go around the woven wire and around the stem. And that seems to be doing good. We aren't trying to shove them through the fence. We did that at first. And I think that's harder on them. And then if they have a fork or a split or a branch, that branch will try to come out, or you'll put it through and the branch will come back and it'll try and go through it, and then it hurts the plant. and I don't like hurt plants. Cages would have been easier, probably way easier. This was a lot of work, but this is here to stay. We can use it. Cucumbers it works good on. Works really good. And then next year, the row where the peppers are, next year we're gonna, it's a cement wall and it's about 24, maybe 30 inches tall. We're gonna put a row of guardrail. It'll be in a little further from this. It'll be about 3 feet wide at the widest. Is that what we want to shoot for, Linz? And we've got a whole pile of guardrails left yet from the cattle. I hope they're strong enough. Might be. So we're going to remove the dirt that's here, and then we're going to put a drain tile in the bottom of this because this all slopes down to the north there. So we'll put a drain tile in there just in case we have an issue with water, which I don't think we'll have here. And then we'll fill it with some compost and probably get a little bit of either horse manure or some cattle manure from the neighbor this fall and put it in there, and then some good dirt on top of that. So then we'll have a small raised bed here that we can grow a row of tomatoes next year and then have cucumbers here so we can alternate a little bit.
So a small raised bed is a 3 by 75?
Yep. We could make it longer. Well, it's what we got, but we've got one side already built and we have the material, so I think it'll be kind of easy to do.
Second thought, if you put tomatoes in, that's the bottom of it?
Yep.
The ground level basically is the top there?
Yeah.
How tall are those going to get?
Oh.
10 feet tall?
Guess we didn't think about that one, did we? These will be our determinate tomatoes, so we can reach the top of them. Yeah, that's true. They will be really frigging tall. Okay, that's good.
Nice shade cover though.
That's good. Yeah, it'll be like a silo standing there.
A little bit.
Huh. We'll have to think about that, won't we? We have a friend that's really tall and he can harvest tomatoes for us. On to the cucumbers. So we have 2 different varieties of cucumbers, Boston pickling and a Chicago pickling cucumber, and a total of 40 plants, which will be more than we're going to use. But they've come along real well. At first when they were planted, they looked good for a week, and we had our irrigation in place and we had it turned on or off depending on the weather if we needed it. And there's a soybean field that's 40 feet that way. And I was running the sprayer that day, so I take responsibility, but from this row of cucumbers and from here on the tomatoes, they really looked sick about 2 days after that, and I thought, well, we did it. But they've kind of come back, and the cucumbers have come back perfect or real well. There's some tomatoes that are still cupped a little bit, but I think it's the dirt here. I think that we need to maybe take a soil test and maybe amend the soil just a little bit. This wasn't ever good tillable ground. It used to be an old lagoon wall, so it's clay. So I think it's more in the soil. So we'll check that this fall. But otherwise, there's 40 plants here, and they're doing excellent. This next week, we're gonna be trimming these, and we're gonna get them tied up better so that they're trained, and they'll be coming up the fence real quick, and then we're gonna wonder where we're gonna go after the fence, I'm afraid. But they have a ton of cucumbers on them. Good blossoms. The bees have been around every day I've been out here. There's bees around them doing the pollinating. So these are going to do great. I think we'll have pickles probably the middle of this coming week, in about 7 days, enough that they'll be big enough we can start canning those. On the other side we have, I don't know, what do we have, 80 or 90 onions, which isn't a lot, but it's enough to get us for what we need, and they're doing real well, and those are on the drip irrigation also. And then we have just a short, maybe a 20-foot row of beets, and they're doing good too. We didn't irrigate those, I should have, but it's easy to pull the hose there and just sprinkle them once every couple days. So that's our garden for our first year, and so far it's going really good. As long as we don't get any blight or any kind of a bug in the tomatoes, we're gonna have a good crop. The drip irrigation has helped huge. That is a ticket, you guys. If you are thinking about it, it isn't expensive, A timer is $20 to $30, and the hose or the tubing is, I think, about $30 per 100 feet, give or take, for the kind that has holes in it. So if you hook that up in a filter, you're going to have $50 to $75 in it, and that's what it took to water this whole garden. 2 lines, so $75 waters this whole garden every day, and it only runs for 45 minutes. So you're actually saving water because we're not watering the whole area. And we mulch, and that we don't have many weeds, and you don't waste as much water then either. But anyway, enough of that. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time to take and watch our video, and remember to subscribe and hit the like button and ask a question. We might be able to answer it for you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.